My boss fired me. 2 years later, I sold my company to him for $10 million. My name is David, and looking back, I should have quit 3 years before I was fired. But comfort is a dangerous drug. For 5 years, I was the senior sales director for Apex Solutions, the largest medical equipment supplier on the East Coast. I was 32 years old, making $300,000 a year, driving a company-leased BMW 7 Series and wearing $5,000 Italian suits. To my friends and family, I had made it. But every morning, I looked in the mirror and hated what I saw. You see, Apex Solutions wasn't just a business, it was a predatory machine. Our business model was simple, but morally bankrupt. We utilized a legacy supply chain established in the late 90s to import surgical tools and monitoring equipment from Guangzhou, China for pennies on the dollar. A heart rate monitor that cost us $40 to manufacture and import would be sold to regional hospitals for $1,600. That is a 4,000% markup. Now, profit is not evil, but extortion is. Our CEO, a man named Gordon, was the kind of person who believed that if you weren't cheating, you weren't trying. Gordon operated Apex like a cartel. Because we had exclusive contracts with the manufacturers, hospitals had no choice but to buy from us, and Gordon knew it. The incident that destroyed my career started on a Tuesday in mid-January. I was sitting in my corner office overlooking Manhattan, reviewing the quarterly projections. I noticed a disturbing trend. Our retention rate was dropping. A new competitor from Europe had entered the market with prices 30% lower than ours. I did what any good director would do. I drafted a comprehensive 40-page report titled The Pivot Strategy. My plan was to lower our hardware markup to a reasonable 500%, but introduce a mandatory subscription-based maintenance software. This would lower the upfront cost for hospitals, securing their loyalty, while generating recurring revenue for us. It was a win-win. It was modern. It was sustainable. I booked a meeting with Gordon. Walking into his office felt like walking into a cigar lounge from the 1980s. The air filtration system was humming, trying to clear the smoke from his Cuban cigar, something he smoked indoors despite it being illegal in New York City. Rules didn't apply to Gordon. "David," he grunted, not looking up from his phone, "this better be good. I have a tea time in an hour." I laid the report on his mahogany desk. "Gordon, we have a problem. The Europeans are undercutting us. Clients are angry about the pricing. I've outlined a strategy to pivot to a service model. It cuts our upfront margins but secures the contracts for 10 years. Gordon stopped scrolling. He picked up my report, weighed it in his hand for a second, and then dropped it into the trash bin next to his desk without opening the cover. The sound of that heavy report hitting the metal bin echoed in the room. "You think I pay you to think, David?" Gordon asked, finally looking me in the eye. His eyes were cold, dead sharks. "I pay you to close. I don't care about the Europeans. I care about this quarter's bonus." "But clients are leaving," I pressed. "If we don't adapt, we lose the City Health Network account." Gordon stood up. He was a large man, imposing. He walked around the desk and stood inches from my face. "Then you lock them in. I want you to rewrite the renewal contracts, triple the early termination fees, hide the price hikes in the legal addendums, make it so expensive for them to leave that they have no choice but to stay. Trap them." I felt a knot in my stomach. That's unethical, Gordon. Probably illegal. I can't do that to the administrators I've spent 5 years building relationships with. Gordon smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "Then you are useless to me." He walked back to his chair and pressed the intercom button. "Security, escort David out. He's done here." I stood there stunned. "You're firing me for trying to save the business?" "I'm firing you because you're soft," Gordon sneered. "And don't even think about getting clever. You signed a non-compete agreement when you started. It says you cannot work for any medical supply company in North America for 24 months. If you so much as sell a Band-Aid in this town, I will unleash my legal team on you. I will sue you until you are homeless. I will bury you, David. Now get out." 10 minutes later, I was standing on the sidewalk of Fifth Avenue, holding a cardboard box containing a stapler, a picture of my wife, and a dead succulent plant. I had no job, no severance, and a legal threat hanging over my head that effectively banned me from earning a living in the only industry I knew. I took the subway home, feeling the weight of failure crushing my chest. But as the train rattled through the dark tunnels, my anger began to clarify into something else, something dangerous. Gordon's non-compete agreement was terrifying. It was designed to scare employees into submission. But I remembered the specific wording, employee. It banned me from being employed by a competitor. It said absolutely nothing about founding one. Gordon wanted to play hardball? Fine. I wasn't going to get another job. I was going to build a weapon.
The conversation with my wife, Sarah, was the hardest part. Sarah is a teacher, the practical one in our relationship. When I told her I had been fired and planned to start a competing company instead of looking for a safe job in another industry, she looked terrified. "David," she whispered, looking at our bank account on the laptop, "we have 6 months of savings. If Gordon sues you, we lose the house. We lose everything." "He can't sue me if I follow the rules perfectly," I argued, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Look at the math, Sarah. Apex has massive overhead. They pay $50,000 a month just for the office rent. They have warehouses, trucks, insurance. Their break-even point is astronomical. That's why they have to gouge clients. If I start lean, no office, no inventory, just a laptop and a phone, I can undercut their prices by 50% and still make a profit. I don't need to beat them, I just need to bleed them." She hesitated for a long moment, then closed the laptop. "6 months," she said. "You have 6 months to make a profit. If not, you apply for a job at the insurance firm my dad works at." "Deal," I said. The next morning, MediLink LLC was born. My headquarters was my dining room table. My IT department was my neighbor's kid who helped me set up a domain. But the real challenge wasn't setting up the website, it was finding the product. In this business, supply is everything. Gordon had exclusive contracts with the big 3 manufacturers in Guangzhou. If I tried to buy from them, they would report me to Gordon immediately. I needed a back door. I spent 3 weeks waking up at 3 a.m. in China trying to find a supplier who wasn't in Gordon's pocket. It was brutal, rejection after rejection. "No volume, no deal," one factory manager told me before hanging up. "We only work with Apex," another said. I was hitting a wall. It was week 4, and I hadn't sold a single item. The silence in the house was deafening. Every time Sarah came home from school, her eyes would drift to the dining table, silently asking if I had made a sale. The answer was always no. Then, I remembered a business trip I took 4 years ago to a trade show in Shenzhen. I remembered meeting a young factory owner named Mr. Chen. At the time, his factory was too small for Apex. We had laughed at his small booth. But small factories have something big factories don't: hunger. I found his card in an old shoebox and dialed the number. It was 4 a.m. in New York. "Mr. Chen," I said, "this is David. We met at the expo." He remembered me. I laid out my proposal. I told him I couldn't promise him millions in orders yet, but I promised him something else: cash up front. "Mr. Chen, big companies like Apex pay you in 90 days. They squeeze you. I will wire you the money the second I place the order. I will cover the air freight. I will make you my exclusive supplier." There was a pause on the line. "Cash up front?" Mr. Chen asked. 100%, I confirmed. "Okay, we try, but minimal order is 50 units. I agreed. I hung up the phone, my hands shaking. I had the supply. Now I needed the buyers. But I couldn't call Apex's clients. The non-compete agreement specifically forbade soliciting existing customers. If I picked up the phone and called St. Jude's Hospital, Gordon would have evidence to destroy me. So I had to make them call me. I built a website. It wasn't flashy. It was radically transparent. On the homepage, I put a comparison chart. Item, surgical grade scalpel kit. Apex price, $450. Factory cost, $35. Medilink price, $60. I didn't list the product. I listed the scam. Then I spent $500, a huge chunk of our remaining budget, on targeted LinkedIn ads. I didn't target the hospitals generally. I targeted the specific job titles, procurement officer, CFO, and budget administrator within a 50-mile radius. The headline of the ad was aggressive. Your medical supplier is overcharging you by 4,000%. See the real invoices here. It was a gamble. I was essentially declaring war. I launched the ads on a Monday. Monday passed. Nothing. Tuesday passed. Nothing. Wednesday came, and I was starting to draft my resume for the insurance company. Then at 2:15 p.m. on Thursday, my phone rang. The caller ID said St. Jude's Regional Hospital. My heart stopped. This was it. I picked up. Medilink, this is David. David? A woman's voice asked. It was Sarah, the procurement manager at St. Jude's. I knew her well from my old job. You just saw an ad that looks suspiciously like your handwriting. Are these prices real, or is this a scam? It's not a scam, Sarah. I kept my voice steady. It's the future. I cut out the CEO, the offices, and the BMWs. I passed the savings to you. But I can't pitch you. You called me, right? You called me. We're over budget this quarter. Gordon just raised our rates again. If you can get me 50 scalpel kits by Tuesday at the price listed on your site, I'll give you the order. You'll have them by Monday. I hung up the phone and screamed. I didn't scream in fear. I screamed in victory. I had breached the wall. The first 6 months of Medilink were a blur of adrenaline and coffee. That initial order from St. Jude's wasn't just a transaction, it was a domino. Once the other hospitals in the tri-state area heard that Sarah, one of the most respected procurement managers in the city, had switched to the guy working from his kitchen, curiosity got the better of them. My phone started ringing, not just from small clinics, but from mid-sized trauma centers. By month 4, we were generating $200,000 in monthly revenue. I moved operations out of my dining room and into a cheap, drafty warehouse in Queens. I hired my first 2 employees, Mark, a logistics genius who used to drive forklifts for Amazon, and Lisa, a customer success manager who I poached from a luxury hotel chain. I didn't hire salespeople. This was a deliberate strategy. In a commoditized market like medical supplies, everyone sells the same steel and plastic. The only differentiator is service. Apex treated their clients like hostages because of the contracts. I instructed Lisa to treat every nurse and administrator like a partner. If a hospital called at 2 a.m. needing sutures, we didn't quote them an expedited fee. We drove it there ourselves in my minivan. Gordon, my old boss, finally woke up. But true to his nature, he didn't react with innovation. He didn't lower his prices or improve his service. He reacted with a lawyer. It was a Tuesday morning when a process server walked into our warehouse and handed me a thick envelope. It was a cease and desist order, accompanied by a lawsuit filed in the New York State Supreme Court. The allegations were laughable: theft of trade secrets, tortious interference with contracts, and unfair competition. I sat in my small glass office reading the document. My hands were shaking, not out of fear, but out of rage. Gordon knew I hadn't stolen any trade secrets. Our price list was public. My suppliers were different. This is what we call legal bullying. He was betting that I didn't have the cash reserves to fight a protracted legal battle. He wanted to bleed me dry in court fees until I went bankrupt. I called a friend of mine from college who practiced corporate law. He looked at the filing and sighed. David, this is a scare tactic, but even if you win, it will cost you $50,000 in legal fees to get it dismissed. Gordon has a war chest. You don't. I went home that night and stared at the ceiling. I couldn't outspend Gordon. So I decided to outsmart him. I remembered a phenomenon called the Streisand effect, where trying to suppress information only makes it more popular. Instead of hiring a defense attorney, I hired a PR freelancer. I took the lawsuit, redacted the sensitive personal info, and posted it on my company blog and LinkedIn. I wrote a detailed breakdown titled, "My billion-dollar competitor is suing me, not because I stole from them, but because I stopped them from stealing from you." I broke down the math. I showed the lawsuits side by side with a price comparison chart. I exposed the 4,000% markups. I tagged every major hospital administrator in New York. The post went viral within the industry. It was shared by doctors, nurses, and CFOs. It became a PR nightmare for Apex. Instead of scaring clients away, the lawsuit validated me. It proved I was a genuine threat. Gordon was furious, and when a bully gets embarrassed, he gets dirty. 2 weeks later, Mr. Chen, my supplier in China, called me. He sounded terrified. "David, I cannot sell to you anymore. Apex contacted the owner of my factory. They said if we ship one more box to Medilink, they will pull their entire production line. That is $10 million a year for us. You are only $200,000. I am sorry." One by one, my backup suppliers dropped me. Gordon had leveraged his massive buying power to blacklist me from the Chinese manufacturing hub. I had a warehouse full of orders and no way to restock. I stood in the warehouse, looking at the empty shelves. Mark and Lisa looked at me, waiting for a plan. I could have folded. I could have admitted that the giant had won. "Mark," I said, "cancel my meetings for next week. I'm going to the airport." "Where are you going?" he asked. "China?" "No," I said. "China is burned. Gordon owns China. I'm going to Vietnam and India." I spent the next 10 days on a whirlwind trip through Ho Chi Minh City and Mumbai. I visited dusty industrial parks and small family-owned factories that were hungry for entry into the U.S. market but lacked the FDA certifications. I made them a deal. "I will pay for your FDA certification consultants. I will guide you through the U.S. regulatory maze. In exchange, you give me exclusivity for 5 years. You don't sell to Apex. You don't sell to anyone but me." I found a partner in Vietnam who made surgical steel sharper and more durable than the Chinese equivalent. I found a partner in India who produced textiles and bandages at 20% lower cost than Guangzhou. I returned to New York not just with a restored supply chain, but a better one. My costs were lower and my quality was higher. It was time for the death blow. I targeted Apex's crown jewel, the City Health Network. This was a massive conglomerate of public hospitals worth $10 million a year in revenue. It was the account that paid for Gordon's country club membership. I walked into the pitch meeting with the city board. Gordon's VP of sales was there, looking smug in his expensive suit. He pitched first, talking about legacy, reliability, and tradition. Then it was my turn. I didn't use a PowerPoint. I placed 2 invoices on the table. "This invoice," I pointed to the left, "is what you paid Apex last year for disposables, $10 million. This invoice," I pointed to the right, "is what you would pay Medilink for the exact same volume with higher quality steel from Vietnam, $7 million. I looked at the board members. "That is $3 million in savings. That is the cost of 50 new nurses. That is 2 new MRI machines. That is a renovated pediatric wing. You can stick with tradition and line Gordon's pockets, or you can choose efficiency and save lives. It's your choice." The room was silent. The CFO picked up my invoice, did the math on the calculator, and nodded. We signed the contract the next morning.
Losing the City Health Network was not just a loss for Apex, it was a catastrophe. When the news broke that the city had switched vendors to a 2-year-old startup, Apex's stock price plummeted 15% in a single day. Investors started asking uncomfortable questions. Gordon tried to stop the bleeding in the only way he knew how: brute force cost cutting. He fired 20% of his workforce, but in his panic, he fired the wrong people. He kept his expensive sales directors, but fired the customer support staff and logistics coordinators. This created a classic death spiral. With fewer support staff, errors in shipments skyrocketed. Clients would call to complain, but no one answered the phones. Frustrated, more clients canceled their contracts and moved to Medilink. The revenue dropped further, leading to more cuts. It was a self-fulfilling prophecy of doom. Meanwhile, Medilink was exploding. We grew from 3 employees to 25 in 6 months. We had to move warehouses again. Trucks were lining up around the block. But I wasn't celebrating. I was terrified. There's a concept in business called growing broke. It happens when you grow so fast that your cash flow cannot keep up. You see, I had to pay my factories in Vietnam and India up front to secure the goods, but the hospitals, especially the big city networks, paid on net 90 terms. That means they paid me 90 days after delivery. I had a 3-month gap where millions of dollars were going out and zero was coming in. On paper, Medilink was profitable. In reality, my bank account was almost empty. I was losing sleep. I stopped taking a salary so I could pay my staff. I maxed out my credit cards. I knew that if one large shipment was delayed, or if the city paid late by even a week, checks would bounce. We would be insolvent. I was sitting in my office at midnight, staring at a spreadsheet that showed we had 2 weeks of cash left, when my phone rang. I expected it to be a creditor. "David?" The voice was familiar but tired. It wasn't Gordon. It was Jonathan Sterling, the chairman of the board for Apex Solutions. "Mr. Sterling?" I said, rubbing my eyes. "To what do I owe the pleasure? Is Gordon suing me again?" "Gordon is gone," Sterling said quietly. "The board voted to remove him as CEO yesterday. He's being escorted out as we speak." I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but I stayed sharp. "Okay, so why are you calling me?" "Because you beat us, David," Apex admitted. "Apex is bleeding out. We have the infrastructure, the trucks, the warehouses, the national distribution licenses, but we have lost the market's trust. You have the market's trust, the modern supply chain, and the momentum. But I also know how this industry works. You're growing too fast. I've seen your credit reports. You need capital, or you're going to hit a wall." He was right. He knew my weakness just as I knew his. "We want to acquire Medilink," Sterling said. "We want to merge your operations into ours. We replace our outdated systems with your supply chain. You save Apex from bankruptcy, and we save you from a liquidity crisis." I leaned back in my chair. This was the exit. This was the moment. "I'm listening," I said. "We are prepared to offer you $5 million for 100% of Medilink, plus a salary of $200,000 a year to stay on as VP of Operations for 2 years. $5 million? It was enough to retire. It was enough to never worry about a mortgage again. My heart wanted to scream, yes, but my brain, the business brain that had fought a war for 2 years, knew better. In any negotiation, the person who is more desperate loses. Sterling thought I was desperate for cash, but he was desperate for survival. Without me, Apex would be liquidated within a year. "Mr. Sterling," I said, my voice steady, "I appreciate the offer, but you are valuing my company based on my current revenue. You should be valuing it based on your potential losses. If you don't buy me, I will continue to take your clients until Apex share price is 0. I'm not selling you a company. I'm selling you a lifeline." "What do you want?" he asked. $10 million, I said. Cash, wired at closing. And I don't stay on as VP of Operations. I walk away. I want a clean break. Also, I want a clause in the contract. All 25 of my current employees are guaranteed jobs at the new entity for a minimum of 12 months at their current salaries. $10 million is double the valuation, Sterling protested, and we can't guarantee jobs during a merger. Then I'll see you in the bankruptcy court when I buy Apex's assets for pennies in 6 months, and I moved to hang up. "Wait," Sterling shouted. I heard him shuffling papers. "Give me 24 hours to convene the board." "You have 12. The next morning at 8 a.m., the term sheet arrived in my inbox. $10 million, full employee protection. I signed it.
1 week later, I drove my beat-up minivan into the parking garage of the Apex Solutions headquarters. The security guard, an old man named Earl who had worked there for 20 years, recognized me. 2 years ago, he had been ordered to escort me out of the building like a criminal. Today, he looked at his clipboard, saw my name at the top of the VIP list, and tipped his cap. "Welcome back, Mr. David," he said. "Good to see you." I parked in the spot marked "Reserved for CEO." It was a petty move, I admit, but after 2 years of guerrilla warfare, I allowed myself this one moment of ego. I took the elevator to the top floor. The boardroom was exactly as I remembered it: cold, sterile, and smelling of expensive leather. Jonathan Sterling and the rest of the board were waiting, but the person I was looking for wasn't at the table. Through the glass walls of the conference room, I looked out into the hallway, and there he was, Gordon. He was clearing out his office. The man who had threatened to sue me until I was homeless, the man who believed he was untouchable, was now packing his belongings into a cardboard box, the exact same type of box he had forced me to carry. He looked older, defeated. He was still wearing a suit, but his posture was slumped. He looked up and saw me standing in the boardroom, about to sign the papers that would merge my company with his. Our eyes met. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I didn't give him the finger. I just watched him. In business, you don't need to scream to win. Silence is often the loudest sound in the world. Gordon looked away, grabbed his box, and hurried toward the service elevator. He walked out of the company he built and into obscurity. I turned back to the table. "Gentlemen," I said, "let's sign." The process took an hour. At 11:42 a.m., I checked my banking app. A notification appeared. Incoming wire transfer, $10 million USD. Seeing that many zeros on a screen doesn't feel like winning the lottery. It feels like taking off a heavy backpack that you've been carrying for years. It feels like oxygen. But I had one more piece of business to handle. I drove back to my warehouse in Queens. My team was working, unaware that the deal had closed. I called an all-hands meeting. 25 people gathered around, looking nervous. They knew I had been talking to Apex. They feared they were about to be laid off. "Everyone," I said, my voice cracking slightly, "today, MediLink was acquired by Apex Solutions. But before you panic, I have 2 things to tell you." The room went dead silent. "First," I continued, "your jobs are safe. It is written into the contract that you are guaranteed employment for the next 12 months with full benefits." A collective sigh of relief swept through the room. Second, I pulled out a stack of envelopes. I sold the company for $10 million. I built this place, but you guys kept it running. You worked late nights. You dealt with angry drivers. You believed in me when I couldn't pay myself. I handed out the envelopes. I had set aside $1 million, 10% of the sale, to split among the staff based on tenure. Lisa, my first customer service hire, opened hers. It was a check for $50,000. She covered her mouth and started to sob. Mark, my logistics guy, just stared at his check and whispered, "This is my kid's college tuition. This is the whole thing." That moment, watching my team cry tears of joy, was worth more than the other $9 million combined. So, what is the lesson here? Why did I tell you this long story? It's not to brag about the money. It's to tell you that the business world is changing. People like Gordon, the extractors, think business is about squeezing every last cent out of people. They think it's about monopoly, intimidation, and hiding behind lawyers. They are dinosaurs and they are extinct. The future belongs to the creators. It belongs to the people who look at a broken, inefficient system and say, "I can fix this." I didn't win because I was a genius. I was a B student in college. I won because I was willing to be transparent in an industry that was secretive. I won because I treated my customers like partners instead of prey. And I won because when someone told me I wasn't allowed to compete, I didn't listen. Today, I'm 35 years old and retired.
I spend my days investing in lean startups. I look for founders who are hungry, who have been underestimated, and who have a chip on their shoulder. If you are stuck in a job where you are undervalued, if you see your boss doing things the wrong way, pay attention. Don't just get angry. Take notes. That inefficiency you see every day, that is not an annoyance. That is a market opportunity waiting for you to seize it. You don't need millions to start. You just need a kitchen table, a laptop, and the courage to bet on yourself. Thank you for listening to my story. If you enjoyed this journey from fired to financially free, please hit that like button and subscribe. I'll see you in the next video.